Welcome back to the Interior Design Podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Roy, and today's episode is coming to you from the stunning Solus showroom at Clerkenwell Design Week. A big thank you to Joe Burley from Solus for making this recording possible. We're so grateful to be surrounded by such inspiring materials and brilliant design energy. Our guest today is someone who is truly changing the way we think about interiors. TEDx speaker and founder of SmartStyle Interiors, Phoebe Oldrey. Phoebe, welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you to say that about me. Okay.
Phoebe, before we dive in, I'd like to share with our community something that you've taught me, that I learned from you. Did you know that studies have shown cluttered environments can raise cortisol levels and even mimic PTSD symptoms? It's a powerful reminder of how our homes impact our mental health, and your work speaks directly to that, doesn't it?
Yeah. I found that fact when I read it really blew my mind because clutter, we always think of it as a small thing. And I knew firsthand that I'd seen the effect of clutter on mental health, as my mother near the end of her life had become a bit of a hoarder. And the effect that basically the symbiotic relationship between the fact that as her mental health deteriorated, the ability to stay on top of her home and her stuff and what possessions meant, and then that in itself exacerbated the problem of mental health. So there was one point of it which was there was an element of a personal take on it. There's a lot of blog posts and magazine articles out there which always just go, oh, studies say. And I went, well, what is this study of which you speak? And so I went and looked it up, and I've got the name here. So it was done by UCLA, and they actually have a department called the Center of Everyday Lives of Families, which is a bizarre department for a university to have. And they basically studied 32 families based in the LA area, and they went and looked at all aspects of their life within their home. And there was many things that came up on it. One of it was like how we'd use kitchens differently and how spaces are used. But part of that study was they looked at how people reacted to clutter in their homes. And what they would do is they would follow these people around where they talked about their home. And they would actually take a swab from inside their mouth as they discussed it. And they would see literally the spike in cortisol in these people when they sort of said, oh, no, don't look at that pile of laundry, or don't look at Bob's garage. And when you see the photos in a book, because it was released as a book called Life at Home in the 21st Century, they are overwhelming, the amount of stuff these houses have, garages up, high. And interestingly, they said it was more that women actually had a higher spike in their cortisol due to these piles of clutter. And I think sometimes we underestimate what clutter is or how an effect it can have because it seems so trivial, and it seems like, we're all into the home edit, and does clutter mean we need our cereal boxed and packaged with individual labels on it? But it means we just need spaces that work better for people. And looking at it on a design level, you can approach it from many different levels. But managing to make sure people's homes are, clutter-free makes a huge difference to how people can live in their home, how people mentally feel in their home.
Yeah, huge. I'm obsessively tidy and very messy at the same time, so I create the mess. If it's my mess, it's fine, but if it's somebody else's mess, ooh.
Yeah, and isn't
that weird?
It is really weird. I find I sometimes it's terrible to say, if I go around to some homes and they're overly full of stuff, it is that hard thing is when you begin to know what difference it can make. You'll be like, oh God, I want to tidy it just for them, and you go, no, don't. That's weird.
Okay, so let's start with the common frustrations that we all face. Homes that look great on Pinterest or Instagram, but don't actually work day-to-day life. What do you think are the most common design mistakes people make when trying to balance style and function?
Well, it matters when we say people, whether we're talking about designers approaching a design, but with regular people, I think it's normally an easy one to answer. I think people don't see the connection between how a home works and what a home looks like. And it's often they don't see the power of what design is or that design's for them. And so I call it pretty awful design, where it looks great, but it doesn't function. And they've forgotten to look at themselves first, who they are, how they like to work. You know, do they like cooking? Do they like this? Do they like the other? They've forgotten to look at really putting function first, but they've gone straight in for the pretty. And then they've got a table which they love, but it's too big for the space, and you can't pull the chairs back. And I think that's the thing of seeing it disjointed, that the function and aesthetics, that is design. That is, every designer, that's the two marriages we look for. But a lot of laymen kind of go, well, design is the pretty bit, it's the piece of art, and they forget that actually design is the function as well.
100%. We always, I do a lot of commercial design, and when we're designing something like a restaurant or a bar or something like that, the flow and where people are going is so important. I quite often sit with a pencil and just draw like that.
Yeah,
that's
flow.
Where the waitresses are going to go.
Yeah.
And that's where the clients, their customers are going to go. And there's the route to the toilets, and like in, out, do you know what I mean? And just making sure that you've got enough room, because you get pinch points, don't you?
I read a lot about habit, and so how flow spaces flow is also about the habit that you want people to get from A to B to C quicker. So if you're a restaurant, I'm sure it's this, somebody can get a hot meal out quicker, you've got happier clientele. So if they're having to dodge and weave their way through, you're slowing that down. So it's known as the friction point. So you're always trying to iron out the friction point. But when people are just looking at it on the pretty side of it, they're not looking at the friction point first and then selecting the right pieces to go in.
Yeah, absolutely. And how have you seen that imbalance affect people emotionally?
I think if your space doesn't work, you're always frustrated by it. I think that's just a basic, and you can sort of see it. I mean, I think this was very much at the beginning of the TED Talks. I equated it to a pebble in your shoe. That we know when things annoy you, and you trip over the carpet, or every time you go past the coffee table, you scrunch your leg on it. That is bad design. That is something which leads to a frustration. You're not comfortable. It's annoying. Almost pinging back to the clutter thing, it's if you have to move 3 items to get into the cupboard to put something away, shockingly enough, things don't get put away. So I think it's that where just forgetting the space is a working space. Your home, it's a beautiful place to be, but it is underneath all that needs to be a working space.
Yeah, there needs to be enough space as well, doesn't there? I'm just, while you were saying that, I was just thinking, don't put these certain glasses away in my cupboard because they're too tall for the cupboard. I've got these 2 glasses, they're really frustrating.
Yeah, and so I call them clutter bunnies, where things just don't quite have a home. They're transitory. They're not ready to be thrown out. So newspapers people are reading, magazines which are in play. It's the little pile of paperwork which is on the side of the kitchen. They're the little clutter bunnies. But I think the first part of design, which is almost means I'm backtracking, is people forget to look at themselves. I think they look at design as an outwardly thing, and they forget to look at who they are, how they work, how they function, what lifestyle they want to, that it's not just about what lifestyle they want to live. I think sometimes people see design as aspirational, and it should help us to live a little better in our home. But sometimes people forget just how they live, and then they forget to design it in. So, let's say you're a family with 2 kids coming back from school, and I'm going to pick primary school age just to run the scenario. They've got scooters, and they've got backpacks, and they've got all the paraphernalia they come in, and that stuff needs to be in and out every single day. And so what happens? We don't design homes that accommodate that, or an easy process. And so it's blonk in the hallway. And then we go, every day I come in, the hallway is such a mess. There's all this I need to sort it out. And it's just not looked at lifestyle first, then looked at the function of how to make that lifestyle work, and then added, we'll have a beautiful cupboard, but the doors are easy to things. We just slide it in, we don't think about it, and then we can slide it in and out. So it's like a process, and it's looking at yourself first.
suppose it changes over time as well, doesn't it? Especially if you've got kids. They grow up, don't they? They don't have the scooters anymore.
I think that's the element of flexibility of something. You know, that if you design a cupboard so it can fit the scooters in, don't put a fixed shelf in, because then you might want to take it out and have 2 rows of hanging coats, or you might suddenly, you know, that life does change. And the more permanent a piece of furniture, the more flexible it has to be. So it needs to accommodate now and be able to grow with the future. But it still starts with going, who am I now? Because sometimes people go, well, we won't have scooters in 5 years' time. You go, well, in 5 years' time, you may have all died falling over the scooters. So you might not get there if we don't think about them now. So.
Brilliant. So I'd like to explore your philosophy a little bit. If that's okay. It really stands out for me in this industry, holistic and centered around well-being, and I absolutely love that. I love, you know, when you go into in somewhere and have a treatment, so like you had a massage, then you go into somewhere holistic, they look at you as a whole person. Instead of going into the doctors and say, I've got a sore knee, and they don't look at why you've got a sore knee, they just give you some tablets.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that, isn't it? And it's about that kind of, and I love that in the context of that in interior design really fascinates me, and your theory on it.
It was a big move to do it. I mean, one is I myself had to look at what holistic means, and really open a dictionary and look it up, and it just means everything's connected. Because I think holistic at the same time is also used for, you know, like, oh, it's all holistic, and like we're all having a gong bath.
A bit woo-woo.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing is that people then go, it's all a bit woo-woo. But in actual fact, holistic means everything's connected. And so the idea that we are connected to our spaces on many different levels, and how our space affects us is the approach I began to look at. I think I've been in the industry for a period of time, and was getting to that point where something felt off for me personally, that I felt that I wasn't delivering design that kind of fulfilled something else, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And the first stage of it was I ended up going to the BIID conference, and they had a guy who designed offices stand up and talk about the difference of how you could design an office, and it would create community, and it would create staff retention, and it would create, you know, and therefore leading into that would be brand and all the rest of it. And you go, wow, what a different way of looking at it. Because I myself had been like, oh, well, you know, what's coming up the line? What's the trendy? What's happening? How can we make a space look nice? And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then the next person spoke was Professor Hilary Dolk, who spoke about colour and how it affects people, but, you know, really on a psychological level. And I left from the conference really buzzing from this. And I'd then nerdily read on the side, go, oh, okay, well, this is kind of interesting, but thought, still couldn't see how it connected into how I could work. And would then talk like a nerd in the pub about it, and people would be like, oh my goodness me. And then I put myself, in Tunbridge Wells we have a franchise for TEDx, and it was coming up, and I put myself forward and said, I'd like to do this. This is what I'd like to speak to. It really excites me, this other aspect of design, because I think we get underestimated as interior designers, and we're seen as purely the pretty, and people see the sub-function of an architect, but they don't always see really the wealth of what we can bring. And it's easy for me to fall into that trap of forgetting to what wealth we can bring as well. So I wanted to really talk about it in a public space and say, look, we do more. We can bring more to the party than you think we're about. And then they went, yeah, of course, we'd love to hear you speak. And I went, oh, man alive. I better really make sure that what I've been talking about is properly researched and understood and supported with, you know, stuff underneath. And so I went knee deep, wrote the whole thing, really looked at a lot of things. And the more I read and continue to read now, the more fascinated I am by it. But what I wanted to do was look to how we can quickly define this, because it can be such a huge topic. And there's so many things that can plug into it. I ended up looking at it on 3 different levels. And one of them is function. Every designer is looking at a space functioning really well. The other one is aesthetics. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater while we're trying to prove that we're more than that. We are also that. And then the third element of it is how a space feels. And each one of these loops back into the other. So there's sometimes how a space function is how it feels. What a space looks like is how it functions as well. That each one kind of crosses across. But the easy way of looking at it in the 3 different areas. And that's how I structured also the TED Talk to talk about it. And then I put my heart on my sleeve and structured my business to sort of say this is very much what I stand for and what I do. And it made a big difference to me generally because I felt that what I could deliver went beyond whether or not we were putting up the latest tile, but actually in fact creating homes people really wanted to be in. And I always say is one of the most meaningful things for me is when people talk about their homes, when they talk about coming back from a holiday and they go, I walk into my home and I felt it was a lovely space to be in. I felt welcomed. I felt, safe and secure, and it was a haven, and all those words we should have about our home. And you can't put that on a photograph, but I kind of remember it, and it means a lot to me when they say it.
How has your business changed since you have made that shift?
It changed a lot, actually. Yeah. So it was 2017, and I was in the middle of sort of rebranding something. Yet again, it was a lot of things feeling off, and I felt that I wasn't running something which was quite right for me. And interestingly, at that point, I was still seeing them as divided. I was still seeing as, well, I'm going to do the TED Talk because it's just my, secret passion, but I'm going to keep my interior design business as it is because that's a safe pair of trousers, so to speak. And I was working with somebody who was trying to help me define the brand. And I sort of went, I'll send you the TED Talk, I've written it this far, and, just because you might be interested. And she wrote back to me and went, why on earth is this not what you're leading with? This is everything you stand for. And I think I was very scared because to sometimes come out with a different concept, you do wonder if you limit yourself or you've shut people out. And then it went, actually, I want to get up every day and run this business. That's where my passion lies. This is where I feel I can make a difference. And so a lot of it made a big change in 2017. And, the new website came out and all the branding, but this big message behind it. And at that stage I was blogging, so it was really good because I could really look deep into a subject and write about it and share my feelings and opinions about it. And it's interwoven into my work. And what I like to feel is that people hire me as an interior designer, but we'll look at the space in different ways and look at how they work in a space to try and deliver it on these multiple levels.
It's all about asking the right questions, isn't it?
And I think the other big thing which I did is I slowed my process down a lot. So it starts with quite a hefty questionnaire, which everybody hates. You can see it on their face. You're going, but I need to know. And then drilling down into that, but also slowing down the process. So you've got more room to maneuver and more room to kind of, I think, step them through the design as you're building it. And the reason for that is that we can make alterations quicker earlier on. And I always say I listen for the noises as well as what the feedback is, because then I go, okay, what's the feedback? They go, oh, yeah, it's great. And you're like, okay, that's not a good noise. And I said, I'm not going to be insulted. Let's talk through it. And they went, oh, maybe that's not a colour for me. Maybe this is or, and so therefore you're moving it. But also getting to know people, because people won't talk about their sleep patterns possibly straight out the gate. But you may learn more about it when you're designing a bedroom, and about, if they're a couple, which one sleeps better, which one's out like a light, which one's, awake at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so you begin to know more those rhythms. They sort of come out in the design process as well.
Yeah, it's about building that relationship, isn't it, and the rapport.
All of us have this thing within design. You have to ask quite personal questions, and it can feel quite intrusive but at the same time you have to ask them, because it's designing things correctly for the way, there's a lot of generic psychology I can understand, but it's actually then pinpointing it down to them themselves.
It's all about them, isn't it? It's so important. You place a strong emphasis on designing how people feel in a space. How do you uncover those emotional needs in your clients? and translate them into a physical environment?
It's very tricky because one is, how can you say what a space feels like? I mean, we've all experienced it when we walk into, let's say, a restaurant and you go, oh, I don't feel comfortable here. But you couldn't always tell yourself why. So one with clients is it's about, as I just said, having a very large questionnaire and then going through it, over them, anything which sort of pops up, asking questions. Even from the time I bid on a job, I will ask a sentence at the end. I go, like, when we finish this job, how do you want your home to feel? I always find it really telling what their answer is, because some people, a lot of the classics are, I want it to feel warm, I want it to feel welcoming, I want it to feel joyful. The ones which are always a bit alarm bells for me is, I want it to have wow factor. When other people walk in the house, I want them to be blown away by it. One person is talking about how they want to feel in their home, and the other person is wanting to impress other people. And there isn't to say that that is a bad thing. It's just not what holistic interior design is about. I can't design for the strange, for the, Mabel next door who might pop over for tea and decide she does or doesn't like your tiling. I can design to make a warm, happy, joyful home. And it's that first sentence and then building on that, taking a lot of the questionnaire. I think the other thing is looking at it on two levels. One is that having a knowledge as much as humanly possible about things generically. So, so let's say with colour psychology, we all have an element of, where we kind of know enough about it. Proximometrics is another really interesting about how close or how far people want to be. There's a great one which I love, which is called Prospect Refuge, which is how you feel in a space that you need to feel protected from the back, but like you've got a whole view ahead, which is why booths in restaurants, everyone loves them. Those are generic ways of looking. So always looking to make sure
we're on. That?
It's called Prospect Refuge.
Prospect Refuge.
So you're always prospecting. So you've got as wide a view as humanly possible, and therefore you can see danger coming. You can see if the lion's about to get you or whatever. But refuge is you're protected. So a lot of the time we feel uncomfortable if our backs are exposed, and so that will dictate how you sit in a room. So if you have a sofa, let's say a corner sofa, you can almost plot exactly how people will sit on that sofa. You can go, right, that's the first seat that will go, that's seat number 2, that's seat number 3, and then people will start feeling more uncomfortable there and more uncomfortable there. So if you're looking at these in general, you can begin to look at that more like, we're probably going to look generally how we lay a space out, taking into account that. There's going to be certain colours, colour psychology wise, that I'm not going to favour in certain rooms. If somebody says, I want my bedroom to be relaxing, I'm probably not going to paint it bright red, because that's going to have the opposite effect on people. Interestingly, did you use Matthew Walker's book on sleep?
No, not heard of that.
So it became, bizarrely, quite the bestseller. But his book on sleep talks about what people physically and the circadian rhythm, what they need to go through to have a good night's sleep. So by understanding that, we're going to roll that out in a bedroom. And it's more like you want your temperature to drop a little bit. So having a dark blue in there isn't a bad thing. Where loads of people go, I don't, it's kind of cold. You went, I wouldn't dismiss it. So some of it's generic, and then it gets into getting into the really personal. So if we get on with the sleep again, if somebody, you've got to come and ask, how do you sleep? And some people don't sleep very well. So then you're going to look at things like you would as any designer. Do we need blackout lining? Do we need this? Do we need the other? Often I say to people, can we try and get your phone out of the room? But I haven't got control of that. That is their decision to do as they wish. But if we can kind of say, get an alarm clock, that's going to do you better. The big thing, working with another client and also being a lady of a particular age, the effect of menopause. So if somebody's getting hot, but they may be cold to begin with, do we need to layer more the bed? These are the kind of things where you can get into the personal side. So start with the big knowledge and get down to the personal. But it's hard when you have to ask a woman, your client,
Are you
Do you
menopausal?
struggle with poor sleep? Is there any reason for that? But some people are very happy to discuss it, and you've got to roll with it.
Yeah. It's really fascinating, isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, I don't sleep well at all, so I've read a lot about sleep, so I'm definitely going to read
Oh,
that.
his stuff's really, he does, and also he pops up a lot on interviews and things like that, because obviously I think his book everyone went mad for his book, so he pops up a lot on podcasts. So if you want to go for the quick starter session, just tune into one of them.
Okay,
So.
I will. How do you design for wellness? What are the non-negotiables in a space that truly supports mental and emotional well-being for you?
Okay. With the wellness, it's such a huge topic. The first time when I started to look at it, actually, I found there was a place in the US called the Wellbeing Institute. And they divide it by 7 different areas which they look at. And luckily, I've written them down so I don't lose them. So there's air, water, nourishment, light, fitness, comfort, and mind. Now, I think there's other things that plug into that as well. I think sleep, habit, I think lifestyle's a huge thing. Posture and support. I mean, that could come under comfort, but if we're designing the layout of a room and the TV sight lines are off, are people watching it at an angle? Are they scrunched up? Are they wrinkled up? Are bar stools too high? And there's ways of looking at comfort where in actual fact we're physically supporting people properly with the furniture we're putting them in. It can be trickier because you can pick a sofa and you send them to the sofa showroom and they'll sit on it in a very formal way in the showroom, and it turns out they sit like they're nesting in their own home. So they haven't always tested it to the fullness of the extent. But anyway, those are the 7 which the Institute sort of talks about. Some of these are harder as an interior designer to completely cover, but we do it the best you possibly can. So let's say air. The best thing for air is where you live. So if you're in a city, your air quality coming in your window is going to not be as good as your air quality coming in if you're living in the middle of a field. I can't control that. An architect may be able to control how when they build the building, how ventilation and everything works, so there's more air coming through. On the other side of it, I can't control if a client loves a scented candle or a Glade plug-in, or they use domestic, household sprays which have more VOCs in it. I can't control that. But what can I control in that factor? I can control what VOCs are in the paint we put in. I can control whether or not, a lot of furniture, when it gets delivered, it's got a period which is called gassing off, which I just find very juvenilely funny, which is that you get that kind of the new car smell, which is basically all the formaldehyde and all the chemicals, coming into the air. How can we minimize that? New furniture is going to have that more than reupholstered old furniture. The more, so there's those sort of things where you're trying to look at it as a designer. How can I do it? I think some of these are, key. Nourishment. How do we design a kitchen that cooking really is at the heart of it? Because people can make a good meal. They're not ordering Deliveroo. So fitness is another one which I find really intriguing, because a lot of the time we're trying to minimize how much people move to have to do something. But then the question is, do we actually need to change that so that people are moving more? And that's a really hard balance to make. I always look to it. Have you heard the thing about doctors and the so when you go to the doctor, some doctors ring the little buzzer on their desk and go, Miss Roy, can you please come to the surgery down the hallway? And you do the walking to them. And then there's the other doctors who get up and come to the waiting room and go, Miss Roy, please follow me. What they found was the doctors who were getting up, so you're having to do that every 5-10 minutes, get up, you're just taking a few steps down the hallway and then you're coming back again, were in better shape than the ones who were just ringing the bell at their desk, because sedentary is like the new smoking, as we've all heard. and that's, I forgot what it's called, where it's all, you've designed an element of movement and fitness into a workspace. Next question is, how do we do that within a home? And will the client be resilient to it?
Yeah.
Because often they don't want what they would see as a friction point. So you've got to look at that balance. So
It's fascinating, isn't it? And the other thing, the problem with it is that you can't always get it right, can you? It's like the client might say to you, I want to move more. But then you make them move more and they don't like it. You know, you don't know if they're actually going to live it and accept it. I suppose you have to go through it with them in quite a lot of depth to make sure that they are on board with it.
Well, it's that weird thing is, I think this is where I see things like habit come in as well. There's so many great things to read about habit. But if people are wanting to, get fit more, is it you make it easy for them to get their wellies on to get out the front door? This is where the personal comes in, because it's about how that person's functions. And you're there going, okay, I'm having to get to know you, and I'm having to get to know you down to the finite thing that you will probably maybe do something a little bit more than less, but I will never know whether this does or doesn't work, because you're unlikely to phone and say, I'm walking more.
Your TED Talk left a real impression on me, especially your quote, interior design isn't about impressing strangers, it's about creating a space that feeds your soul every day. And I'm like, I've got goosebumps just saying that now. Can you tell us the story behind the idea and what inspired you? How did it shape your approach going forward? I think we've kind of covered a little bit of that, haven't we?
I think it's about people-centric design, which all design should be. That's the very key of what ergonomics is. But it's we've taken people out of it. And that was the thing for me, is that it was about impressing people. It was about having it look pretty. It was about this sort of side of it. And I was 100% in that camp, because I felt that has been what I've been told to do. And I began to see it differently. And I began to see that it's almost peddling about, if you buy a hamster, we look to how we can make them happy in their cages. Why do we not do this for ourselves? We live in these houses and they are our homes, and that means so much to us. And we talk about them being a haven and somewhere safe for us to be, and a loving place, and that is what we should be aiming to create. And that is very much what I want to create, is that people feel at their best when they're in those doors, living in those spaces.
I think it really relates, because I do a lot more commercial than residential, but for me, like, the holistic thing is just something I naturally do, because I look at brand. So I'm always going back to the brand, like, what's the brand, what's the story, and like keep tagging that back. So everything that I do is kind of related, but this is it. I really loved listening to your talk, because, and I love this theory, because it is how you do it in Resi. It's how you do that. Everything comes back to the brand. In Resi, everything comes back to the person and who are they, what they're doing.
And I think, interestingly, in commercial, and that is where we're talking in commercial, psychology has been used on us for years, but like in a bad way. So, within shops, they understood how a person works to their best within a shop. And they would know that if you had things folded up and you touch something, apparently you make more of a personal connection to it. So therefore you're more likely to go, well, yes, I do love this sweater. And you go to the till. How you design a changing room, how you design the flow, how you do this. A lot of this has been used in commercial environments since the year dot. It's not it's not a coincidence that the bakery aisle smells of bread and all the bread's in a package. It's pumped in. These things have been used for a long, long time to actually press our little psychological buttons to have us form a particular behavior. And that's what I quite liked undoing, is unpicking it like dark magic and then going, how could we use it for good? I still think there's a long way, with certain commercial areas. I'm fascinated with them. I just don't happen to do as many. I think the office is the most underutilized area, and where we could make a huge difference to people's lives with how we design them and how approaching them in a holistic approach. And some of the research behind it, some of it's terrifying when you read some about how people are in a open plan office and how it can push their mental health to its limits. And yet it's so underutilized with how we can change that and how we could therefore change people's work lives. And when people at work so much, what an amazing difference that would make. Or how would it change companies' productivity if people actually wanted to go to an office instead of sitting at home going, I'm happier here, thanks.
I think COVID has been brilliant for that, because a lot of people have gone home and stayed there because they don't like going to the office, because they don't like it.
Yeah.
And I'm working with quite a few different companies since COVID. I'm working with one at the moment in central London where they can't get their staff back into the office.
Yeah.
So they're having to refurbish and they're having to create like little pods so people can have private conversations and private offices and lots of little breakout areas that people can use, because people don't want to sit in the open plan and have that conversation with whoever it is they're having that with. And we have gone very much from everyone having their own office, haven't we, in a lot of places, not necessarily in central London, but there's been a massive shift towards the open plan office.
Yeah.
And I kind of like it, but sometimes I don't. We've got an open plan office.
This
put
is
my
where I
headphones
got to
in.
get a bit woolly about it, but I think there's an optimum amount of people we can all spend time with. So sometimes when the higher it gets, you get an acoustic problem anyway. You get more and more people, more and more spread out. We're all much more plugged into, devices and music anyway. There's a slight disconnect there anyway. But there is this idea that if we start creating more individual areas, so it's not just the pod, but even if we're just into a table of 8 instead of a room of 150, and that people can feel that they are happy there and they've got some autonomy there and stuff like that. I think there's a lot which could be done, but even small offices. So I'm in Tunbridge Wells, and we recently redid an office, and it was like a 2-3 man office, and it was very much like, well, I want it to be a nice place to be. And he'd already looked at a number of office designers, and then he came to me because he went, I just keep being shown like 6 desks in a room, boomf. And we ended up turning it into more of a living room, and it has a coffee table that can turn into, it kind of starts a coffee table, or you can pop into a desk, and then it can pop into a table. So they can have it like a boardroom, and they go, well, we entertain now, and we all spend more time in the evening, and da-da-da-da. And you're going, yay!
Yeah, that's how it should be.
It should be, different. It's that coming at it from a different angle. But offices,
Do you know what I love about so the holistic side of something like a restaurant? I think somewhere like a public space like that, people like to understand the space. So if you tell them what to do through like the flooring, this is the gangway, and this is where the chairs and tables go, kind of thing, and the floor is different. That people love things like that, and because it's clear. It's really clear. It's clear to the staff. It's clear to all the customers. Everyone knows where they're going, and I think that's one of the things that I really focus on for holistic, like commercial space, is that kind of telling people what to do, where to go, having clear signage, and making sure that everyone understands. You can kind of like almost with interior design, you can always kind of like control what happens with the flow of things, and with the flooring or with the lighting and everything all kind of like going in the same direction.
Yeah, and what I love in restaurants as well, which really, well done, is when they can create the idea that you can have an intimate space. So there's just like 2 of you at a table, but with the lighting, and you can literally have people sat next to you, but you can still feel like there's just the pair of you. I think that's genius, and I've always find very peculiar. I remember there was a pub where I used to work, and it was a really lovely place to go, and all the seating worked. And then they just moved everything around, but they didn't change the lighting. And suddenly it was so off, you couldn't put your finger, and it was like nowhere you really wanted to sit. But it's that thing of being able to create space you want to sit in, where you kind of go, here we are. We all might be around people. So this is where proximometrics comes in, and just they're going, it's about how I can be with 2 people while still surrounded by a lot of people. And it's the social space and the personal space. And
It's
so
really
I love,
fascinating,
I do,
isn't
this
it?
is my nerd thing. When you go to a restaurant, my husband's there looking at the menu and I'm like, right, so how's this working? What's going on here? How's this working? You go, this is great.
Since you've done your TED Talk, though, has your message evolved or deepened in any way? Has it changed? 'Cause it's quite a few years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, it feels longer and longer ago. Well, it is longer and longer ago. Every year it passes. But I think it's so released who what I believed in, that I just keep reading more and more and more. And so therefore more plugs in to my knowledge and the way I want to approach things. At the moment, one of the things I've become slightly more obsessed with trying to put the pieces together is about identity and space. And especially when you're working as an interior designer, there's that point of like, where's the crossover between your identity and your client's identity? And normally people have hired me because they like what I do, and so therefore already my designs speak to something they like, so that's a bit easier. But it's then making sure it feels like their space and their identity, and it's hard to talk about that in a holistic way, because surely that's what we're all doing. But yet again, I think that goes back to the pretty awful design, is that when people are gleaning stuff from magazines and looking at what's in trend, sometimes they forget to really put their finger on who they are and what is their identity, and therefore what needs to be in a space to say, this is who I am, and this is how I like to represent myself, and this is why it's my home, not someone else's home.
I think there is some designers, though, that have a style, isn't there?
Yeah.
And you go to that designer because you like their style. But I think, and quite a lot of people in commercial are a bit like that. But I'm definitely in your camp. I like latch on. I like kind of go into somebody and I go, "What's your business?" or "What's your? Who are you?" And people come to my website and they say, all of your designs are so different. Like, what's your style? And I'm like, I don't have one.
Think people see that much difference in my stuff really now. It's really interesting, and I think it was because I started. It wasn't that I was looking to have just one particular house style. It's that certain work began to pop up on my website, and people loved it. So I kept being hired to do more of that, and it's the fact that I loved it. So I think people always go, "Oh, you like colour." I had one person go, "Oh, you use a lot of green." And they're going, "Well, one, when you're working with biophilic design or relaxing spaces, certain colours come up more than other colours." So it's a really hard thing, is where you don't mean to have a house styled, but suddenly you do. And you're like, oh, okay, don't know how we can, smooth this sideways, but,
I suppose it's a lot easier for me because I'm working with different businesses. So one business might have a brand that's red and one not. Maybe I'm being very sort of presumptuous here, because sometimes the interior design isn't the same colour as a brand, but quite often it can be very close. Especially in offices, you want the logo on the wall at some point. You have to kind of design around that. But yes, it's fascinating.
Well, I did a barrister's chambers in London, and of course I think now I look at that and it's much more neutral with this little bit. I always say that I'm probably sitting in the classic contemporary band, which is quite good, because sometimes you can shove more contemporary and you can shove more classic, but I'm never going to be a minimalist shiny surface, and so it was probably shoving a little bit more classic. It was kind of in the heart of I want to say the legal area now because I can't remember. And so I would say that looks very different than a house I did in Tenterden, where it was like really colourful and they let me really go to town. But I still think you can see my hand in it. I think there's still an approach and you can almost see it in there. So it's not that I've deliberately gone house style. It's just like, I think you can spot it's my work.
That's good. That's good. Phoebe, your work's such a beautiful blend of heart and function, and I think it's exactly what the design world needs right now. For anyone starting a new project, what's one piece of advice that you might give them?
Right. Well, I divided this into who I'd be speaking to. I think with designers, I would say that if you're looking to take a more holistic approach, don't panic, you've got the tools already. It's more that it's coming at it from a different angle. That if you've been taught how to lay out a space, you've been taught how to decorate a space, it's just the understanding that your goal might be a little bit different. So it's that if you're looking to wellness, or you're looking to sleep, you're using that same toolbox, but you're just building it a little bit different. So I think that's the thing which almost blew my own mind, is it didn't mean I needed to be a different designer. It's just you need to weave it through a bit of a different way. For the layman who's doing their own design, remember the design bit of it. And I think that's where I see a lot of people where I'm called in retrospectively after they've sort of done it. And most of them have forgotten to actually take time out to design. They've kind of run into the implementation, and then they've got a builder yelling at them, I need some tiling, Bob's coming tomorrow. And they're making quick decisions, and they're looking at Pinterest, but they've also created spaces which are a bit disjointed, because they go, we'll just have a little bit of tiling here, and then we'll maybe do a shelf over there, and they forget to see it as a whole. So just take a step back, take time, enjoy the design process, work it all out on paper, and just look at it as a space as a whole instead of a collection of little Pinterest features. And then it's more cohesive, and people are then feel more cohesive using it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
If today's conversation resonated with you, don't forget to follow, share, and leave us a comment. What's your biggest takeaway from Phoebe's approach? And if you're here at Clerkenwell Design Week, come by the Solar Showroom to see where this episode was recorded and explore some amazing surfaces. You'll find links to Phoebe's TED Talk and website in the show notes. Thank you very much for joining us.